The apartment was too quiet for a place where a child lived. That was the first thing I noticed as I stepped through the doorway. My worn sneakers silent against polished hardwood floors that gleamed under recessed lighting. Everything was pristine, expensive, and utterly devoid of the cheerful chaos that usually accompanied a 6-year-old boy. "Luca," Mrs. Chen called out, her accented voice echoing through the vast space. "Your new nanny is here." I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased a breathtaking view of the city skyline. This penthouse was worlds away from the cramped studio apartment I shared with 2 roommates in the Bronx. Worlds away from anything I'd known in my 26 years. Small figure appeared in the doorway of what I assumed was his bedroom, dark curls falling into solemn brown eyes, shoulders slightly hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. Luca Moretti didn't run to greet me like most kids his age would. He simply studied me with an intensity that seemed far too old for his young face. "Hello, Luca," I said, crouching down to his level despite the distance between us. "I'm Naomi. It's nice to meet you." He said nothing, just continued watching me with those careful eyes. Mrs. Chen, the elderly housekeeper who'd been managing Luca's care between nannies, sighed heavily. "He doesn't talk much," she explained in a low voice. "Not since his mother passed away last year. 7 nannies in 8 months. They all leave." My heart ached at the information. A motherless child, clearly lonely, cycling through caregivers who couldn't or wouldn't stay. I'd taken this job out of desperation, needing the generous salary to pay off my student loans and help support my grandmother's medical expenses. But looking at Luca's guarded expression, I realized this little boy needed more than just another person collecting a paycheck. "Why do they leave?" I asked quietly, though I kept my eyes on Luca, offering him a gentle smile. Mrs. Chen's expression darkened. "The father, Mr. Moretti, he's difficult, demanding, has very specific rules about his son's care. Most can't handle it." She glanced nervously toward the door as if the man might materialize at any moment. "He travels frequently for business, sometimes gone for weeks, but when he's here..." She didn't finish the sentence, but the warning was clear. "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I did. I stood slowly, maintaining eye contact with Luca. "I'm not planning on leaving, Luca. If that's okay with you, I'd like to be your friend." Something flickered in those brown eyes. Not quite hope, but perhaps the distant memory of what hope felt like. Mrs. Chen showed me around the penthouse, her instructions delivered rapid fire as if she was afraid of running out of time. Luca's schedule was regimented down to the minute. Breakfast at 7, educational activities from 8 to noon, lunch at 12:30, outdoor time from 1 to 2, quiet activities until dinner at 6, bath at 7:30, bed by 8. No deviations, no exceptions. "Mr. Moretti will call each evening at 8:15 precisely," she explained, as we stood in the spotless kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. "You must give him a full report. What Luca ate, how he behaved, any incidents, no matter how small. He expects complete honesty." I nodded, committing everything to memory. "When will I meet him?" Mrs. Chen's expression grew even more apprehensive. "He returns from his business trip in 3 days. I'll warn you now, Miss Naomi. Mr. Moretti is not like other fathers. He's intense, protective to an extreme, and he has certain expectations that must be met without question." The cryptic warnings should have concerned me more than they did. But I'd grown up in neighborhoods where people spoke in careful euphemisms about certain men and their business interests. I understood the unspoken language of power and danger, even if I'd never been directly involved in that world. After Mrs. Chen left, I found Luca sitting on his bedroom floor, building an elaborate structure with expensive wooden blocks. His room was beautiful, a child's dream with custom-built shelves, a bed shaped like a racing car, and every toy imaginable. But it felt more like a museum than a space where a child truly lived. "That's impressive," I said from the doorway, not wanting to intrude on his space without permission. "What are you building?" He glanced up at me, then back at his blocks. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "A castle. For my mom. She liked castles." The simple statement, delivered with such quiet grief, made my throat tighten with emotion. I sat down on the floor a respectful distance away, folding my legs beneath me. "Tell me about her." "Your mom." Luca's small hands stilled on the blocks. When he finally spoke, the words came slowly, carefully, as if he was testing whether it was safe to share them. "She had pretty hair, black like yours. She used to sing to me before bed." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't remember the songs anymore." Without thinking, I began to hum softly, an old lullaby my grandmother used to sing to me when I was small, passed down through generations of women in my family. The melody filled the quiet room, gentle and soothing. Luca's head lifted, his eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. "That's pretty." "My grandmother taught me," I explained. "Would you like me to sing it to you sometime?" He nodded slowly, then surprised me by scooting a few inches closer. "Can you help me finish the castle?" "I'd love to." We spent the next hour building together, our conversation flowing more easily as Luca's walls began to crack just slightly. He told me about his favorite foods, how he hated vegetables except for carrots, how he wished he could have a dog, but his father said no. With each small revelation, I learned more about this lonely little boy who'd been forced to grow up too fast. By the time dinner rolled around, Luca had laughed twice. Small, brief sounds that seemed to surprise him as much as they delighted me. We ate together at the large dining table, which felt absurdly oversized for just the two of us, and I told him stories about my childhood, about my grandmother, about the small moments of magic you could find even in difficult circumstances. Bath time revealed more concerning details. Luca was meticulous about following the routine, clearly anxious about deviating from the established schedule. "Papa gets upset if things aren't right," he explained, as he carefully arranged his bath toys in a specific order. "He says routine keeps me safe." I helped him wash his hair, being gentle with the tangles, and wondered what kind of man inspired such careful obedience in a 6-year-old. What kind of father prioritized control over comfort? At 8 o'clock, after Luca was in his pajamas and tucked into bed, I sat in the living room and waited for the promised phone call. At exactly 8:15, the phone rang. "This is Naomi Brooks," I answered, keeping my voice professional. "Miss Brooks." The voice on the other end was deep, cultured, with the faintest hint of an Italian accent that made each word sound deliberate. "I'm Vincent Moretti. Mrs. Chen informed me you're Luca's new nanny." "Yes, sir. I started today. Tell me about his day, every detail." I recounted everything from Luca's breakfast to his bath, noting what he'd eaten, how he'd behaved, the castle we'd built together. I mentioned his comment about his mother, the songs, the brief moments of laughter. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Vincent Moretti spoke again, his voice was tighter, more controlled. "Luca spoke about his mother?" "Yes, sir. He said she liked castles. We built one together." Another pause. "He hasn't mentioned her to any of the other nannies. Not once in 8 months." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. He seems to carry his grief quietly, but I think talking about her might help him process the loss. "You have a degree in child psychology?" There was a challenge in the question, though not quite hostility. "No, sir, but I have experience with grief. I lost my mother when I was 7. The silence that followed felt different. Less guarded, more thoughtful. "I return home on Friday evening," he said finally. "We'll discuss your continued employment then. In the meantime, continue as you have. But understand this, Miss Brooks. My son's well-being is my only priority. If I determine you're not suited for this position, you'll be terminated immediately. No second chances." "I understand, sir. And Miss Brooks?" His voice dropped lower, carrying an edge that sent a shiver down my spine. "Do not let anyone into this apartment. No visitors, no repairmen, no deliveries unless I've authorized them personally. Keep the doors locked at all times. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir." After he hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment, my heart beating faster than it should. There was something in Vincent Moretti's voice, an underlying current of danger that confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't just a wealthy businessman concerned about his son's safety. This was a man accustomed to threats, to enemies, to living in a world where protection wasn't paranoia but necessity. I should have been frightened. Should have recognized the warning signs and planned my exit. But instead, I thought about Luca's lonely eyes and quiet grief, and I knew I wasn't going anywhere. The next 3 days established a rhythm between Luca and me. Each morning I arrived at 6:30 to prepare his breakfast. Each evening, I stayed until after his father's phone call, making sure every detail was documented and reported. But in between, I discovered a child who desperately needed connection, who blossomed under attention and gentle encouragement. We broke the rigid schedule in small ways. Instead of formal educational activities, we turned learning into games. Math became counting his toy cars. Reading became acting out stories with different voices. During outdoor time in the building's private rooftop garden, I taught him to identify birds and clouds, to find beauty in small moments. The most significant change came during bedtime. On the second night, Luca asked hesitantly if I would sing to him. I sat on the edge of his bed and offered him that same lullaby, my voice carrying the melody my grandmother had given me. When I finished, he was crying silently, tears streaming down his small face. "It's okay to miss her," I whispered, gently wiping his cheeks with my thumb. "It's okay to be sad. Your mom would want you to remember her, to talk about her, to keep her alive in your heart." "Papa doesn't talk about her," Luca said, his voice thick with tears. "He gets really quiet when I mention her." So I stopped. My heart broke for both of them. A father so consumed by his own grief that he couldn't help his son process his. A child suppressing his own pain to protect his father from more hurt. "Sometimes grown-ups have a hard time with sadness," I explained, smoothing his dark curls back from his forehead. "It doesn't mean they don't feel it. It just means they don't know how to share it. But you can always talk to me about your mom, anytime you want." He nodded, then surprised me by wrapping his small arms around my neck in a tight hug. "I'm glad you're here, Naomi. I'm glad I'm here too, sweetheart." By Friday, Luca had transformed. He smiled more readily, laughed at silly jokes, even initiated conversations instead of responding in monosyllables. During our evening phone calls, I'd reported these changes to Vincent Moretti, and each time, his responses had grown slightly less formal, slightly more engaged. He asked questions about what made Luca laugh, what stories I told, which songs seemed to comfort him most. Friday evening arrived with nervous anticipation. Mrs. Chen had come by earlier to ensure the apartment was perfect for Mr. Moretti's return. She'd cleaned surfaces that were already spotless, straightened items that were already aligned, all while shooting me sympathetic glances that did nothing to ease my anxiety. "He'll be here at 6, she'd said. "I'll stay to make introductions, then I'll leave you to discuss your employment." Luca was practically vibrating with excitement as 6 o'clock approached. He'd changed clothes 3 times, wanting to look perfect for his father. "Papa's been gone for 2 weeks, he explained. "That's a really long time." At precisely 6 o'clock, a key turned in the lock. The man who entered the apartment commanded immediate attention. Tall, perhaps 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his obviously expensive charcoal suit, dark hair, slightly longer than was strictly professional, with silver threading through at the temples. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble that suggested he'd come straight from a plane or a long meeting. But it was his eyes that held me frozen, ice blue, intense, scanning the apartment with the same careful assessment I'd seen in his son. Those eyes landed on me, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to narrow to that gaze. I felt stripped bare, evaluated, measured against some standard I couldn't name. My skin felt too warm, my breath caught in my throat, and I had the irrational urge to straighten my spine and lift my chin as if preparing for judgment. "Papa!" Luca's excited shout broke the spell as he launched himself at his father. Vincent Moretti's expression transformed instantly. The cold calculation melted into something softer, warmer, as he caught his son and lifted him effortlessly into his arms. "Luca," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion as he buried his face in his son's dark curls. "I missed you, Bambino. I missed you too." Luca was talking rapidly, all his usual reserve disappearing in the safety of his father's embrace. "Papa, Naomi taught me a song about clouds, and we built the biggest castle ever, and she tells really funny stories, and she makes breakfast that looks like smiley faces and—" "Slow down," Vincent said with a soft laugh that transformed his entire face, making him look younger, almost boyish. "I want to hear everything. But first, let me meet this Naomi who has made such an impression." He set Luca down gently, though his hand remained on his son's shoulder, as if he couldn't quite bear to break contact. Then those ice-blue eyes fixed on me again, and I felt the full weight of his attention. "Mr. Moretti," I said, proud that my voice remained steady. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." He moved closer, extending his hand. "Miss Brooks, thank you for taking care of my son." When his hand clasped mine, I felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. This wasn't the soft hand of a businessman who never did anything physical. This was the hand of someone who understood violence intimately, who'd used these hands for things other than signing contracts and shaking hands at business meetings. "It's been my pleasure," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Luca is a wonderful child." Something flickered in those intense eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat delicately from where she'd been hovering near the door. "I'll leave you to discuss business," she said. "Welcome home, Mr. Moretti." After she left, an awkward silence settled over the apartment. Luca, sensing the tension, pressed closer to his father's side. Vincent's hand moved to cup the back of his son's head, a protective gesture that was both tender and possessive. "Luca, why don't you go play in your room for a bit?" Vincent suggested gently. "I need to speak with Miss Brooks." Luca's face fell slightly, but he nodded obediently. Before leaving, he ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist in a quick hug. "Don't go," he whispered. "Please don't leave like the others." "I'm not going anywhere," I promised, returning the hug and catching Vincent's intense stare over his son's head. After Luca disappeared into his bedroom, Vincent gestured to the living room. "Please, sit." I settled onto the leather sofa, hyper-aware of my worn jeans and simple sweater compared to his expensive suit. He loosened his tie slightly and sat in the armchair opposite me, those penetrating eyes never leaving my face. "Mrs. Chen's reports have been glowing," he began, his voice carefully neutral. "She says Luca has improved dramatically since you arrived. He's eating better, sleeping through the night, engaging more. The evening phone calls confirmed this, but I wanted to see for myself." "Luca is resilient," I replied carefully. "He just needed someone to see him as more than a schedule to maintain." One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. "You're criticizing my parenting?" My heart hammered in my chest, but I held his gaze. "I'm not a parent, so I'm not qualified to criticize. But I am someone who understands grief, and I think Luca needed permission to express his." Vincent was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, his shoulders dropped slightly, as if releasing tension he'd been carrying. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been so focused on maintaining structure, on keeping him safe, that I forgot he's still just a child who lost his mother." The admission surprised me. I'd expected defensiveness, perhaps anger at my implied criticism. Instead, I saw a man struggling with his own pain, trying to parent through grief while maintaining the iron control required by whatever life he led outside this apartment. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Brooks," he said, shifting gears. "Mrs. Chen provided your references. Your background check came back clean. But I want to know who you are beyond paper credentials." I took a breath, deciding honesty was the only option with a man who clearly valued truth. "I'm 26, born and raised in Brooklyn. My mother died when I was 7, cancer. My father wasn't in the picture, so my grandmother raised me. I put myself through college with scholarships and work study, graduated with a degree in early childhood education, but couldn't find teaching positions that paid enough to survive in this city. I've been nannying for 3 years because it's the only way I can afford to help with my grandmother's medical bills while paying off my own student loans." Vincent's eyes remained fixed on me, throughout my recitation, absorbing every detail. "Your grandmother is ill?" "Diabetes complications. She needs medication that Medicare doesn't fully cover." "And yet you took a job that requires you to be here from early morning until late evening, sometimes 6 days a week. When do you see her?" The question struck at the guilt I carried constantly. "Sundays, and I call her every night before bed." He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Mrs. Chen mentioned you have a beautiful singing voice, that you've been singing to Luca at bedtime." Heat crept up my neck. I hadn't realized Mrs. Chen had been reporting those intimate moments. He asked me to. He said it reminded him of his mother. Something painful flickered across Vincent's face, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. His mother Isabella used to sing to him, Italian lullabies her grandmother taught her. He paused, his jaw tightening. I haven't been able to sing to him since she died. Every time I try, the words... He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. I understood perfectly. Grief manifests differently in everyone, I said softly. There's no right or wrong way to process loss. You speak from experience. Yes. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that intense gaze that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen. Why do you do this? He asked. Care for other people's children instead of having your own? The personal question should have felt invasive, but somehow it didn't. Because I love children, and I'm good at this. Maybe someday I'll have my own, but right now, I can make a difference in the lives of kids who need someone, like Luca. My son has grown attached to you very quickly. That concerns me. My heart sank. This was it. The moment where he'd say I'd overstepped, gotten too close, broken some unspoken rule. Mr. Moretti. Call me Vincent, he interrupted. If you're going to be part of my son's daily life, formality seems unnecessary. The shift surprised me. Vincent, then. I understand your concern, but children Luca's age need emotional connections. They need to know they're cared for, not just supervised. I would never deliberately hurt him or abandon him. Your contract is for 6 months, Vincent said, his tone turning businesslike. But I'm doubling your salary effective immediately. I blinked in surprise. I don't understand. You're the first person in 8 months who's made my son smile like he used to before his mother died. You're the first person he's hugged voluntarily, the first one he's talked to about Isabella. That's worth far more than the standard rate. He pulled out his phone and began typing. I'm also adding a clause to your contract. If you leave before the 6 months are up, for any reason other than emergency or breach of contract on my part, you forfeit 2 months' salary. I need stability for Luca, and I need to know you're committed. The offer was generous, almost absurdly so. But there was something else beneath it. A test, perhaps, or a way to ensure my loyalty through financial incentive. Either way, I knew what my answer would be. I don't need the extra money to stay, I said firmly. I'm committed to Luca because he needs me, not because of a paycheck. Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was something that might have been respect in his expression. Nevertheless, you'll accept the raise. Consider it compensation for going above and beyond the standard duties. Luca clearly adores you, and that's worth more to me than you can possibly understand. Before I could respond, Luca's voice called out from his bedroom. Papa, Naomi, come see what I built. Vincent rose smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket. We'll discuss the other details later. Right now, my son wants to show us something. He paused, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Thank you, Naomi, for seeing him, for helping him heal. I was beginning to think he never would. We walked together toward Luca's room, and I was acutely aware of Vincent's presence beside me. He moved with the same careful grace I'd noticed in his son. A controlled power that suggested violence lurked beneath the sophisticated exterior. But when he looked at Luca, when his expression softened with love for his child, I saw something else. Vulnerability, fear, the desperate determination of a parent trying to protect his child from a dangerous world. Luca had built an even more elaborate castle than the one from my first day, complete with knights and a princess figure. Look, Papa, the princess is singing to everyone, and they're all happy. Vincent crouched down beside his son, genuine interest in his expression as Luca explained every detail of his creation. Watching them together, seeing the obvious love between father and son, I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just a job anymore. These two had somehow, in just 3 days, worked their way into my heart. It's magnificent, Vincent said seriously, treating his son's creation with the respect it deserved. Tell me about the princess. What's her name? Luca glanced at me, a small smile playing on his lips. Naomi. She has black hair like Naomi and she sings pretty songs. Vincent's gaze lifted to meet mine over his son's head, and the intensity in those ice-blue eyes made my breath catch. There was something dangerous in that look, something possessive and hungry that had nothing to do with Luca, and everything to do with me. I looked away first, my heart pounding for reasons I didn't want to examine too closely. Later that evening, after Luca was in bed and I was preparing to leave, Vincent stopped me at the door. "I need to discuss something with you," he said, his voice low enough not to carry to Luca's room. "Something important." "Of course." He gestured to the living room, and I followed him, settling back onto the sofa while he remained standing, as if the energy thrumming through him wouldn't allow him to sit still. "You need to understand something about our lives. Naomi," he began, his expression grave. "I'm not just a businessman. My family has certain interests that operate outside traditional legal boundaries." My heart beat faster, but I kept my expression neutral. "I had guessed as much." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You're not surprised? I grew up in neighborhoods where certain families held power that had nothing to do with elected office or corporate positions," I replied carefully. I recognized the signs. Vincent studied me for a long moment, and I could see him reassessing, recalculating. "Then you understand that association with me and my son carries certain risks." "What kind of risks?" "I have enemies," he said bluntly. "People who would use my son to hurt me if given the opportunity. That's why the security is so tight, why the rules about visitors and schedules exist. It's not paranoia, it's necessity." I absorbed this information, thinking about Luca's careful adherence to routines, Vincent's intensity on those phone calls, the way Mrs. Chen had seemed perpetually nervous. "Has there been a specific threat?" "There are always threats," Vincent replied. "That's the reality of my position. But yes, recently there's been movement from a rival family. Nothing concrete, just positioning. Which is why I need to know if you're truly committed to this. Because if you stay, you become part of this world. You become someone who needs protection, someone who could potentially be targeted. The smart thing would be to walk away, to recognize the danger and return to my safe, simple life. But when I thought about Luca's smile, his tears when talking about his mother, the way he'd hugged me and whispered, 'Don't leave,' I knew walking away wasn't an option. "I'm staying," I said firmly. "But I need you to be honest with me about the dangers. I can't protect Luca if I don't know what I'm protecting him from." Something shifted in Vincent's expression, a crack appearing in his controlled exterior. "You would put yourself at risk for a child you barely know?" "I would put myself at risk for a child who needs me," I corrected. "And yes, I know it's only been 3 days, but Luca has already carved out a place in my heart. I'm not abandoning him." Vincent moved closer, and suddenly the space between us felt charged with something dangerous and electric. He was tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, and the intensity in his gaze made my pulse race. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish," he said softly, his voice carrying an edge that sent shivers down my spine. "Maybe both," I admitted, refusing to back down despite my racing heart. A slow smile curved his lips, and the expression transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. "My son's instincts about you appear to be correct. You're remarkable, Naomi Brooks." The way he said my name, with that faint Italian accent curling around the syllables, made heat bloom in my chest. This was dangerous territory. He was my employer, and more than that, he was a man who lived in a world I'd deliberately avoided my entire life. "I should go," I said, needing distance to clear my head. "It's late, and I have an early start tomorrow." Vincent nodded, but didn't move out of my personal space. "I'm increasing your security detail as well. You'll have someone following you to and from this apartment, watching your building, ensuring your safety." "That's not necessary. It's non-negotiable," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "You're under my protection now, Naomi. Accept it." The possessive declaration should have frightened me. Instead, it made something warm and dangerous unfurl in my stomach. I managed a nod, not trusting my voice, and moved toward the door. Vincent followed, his presence a warmth at my back. As I reached for the doorknob, his hand covered mine, stopping me. I turned, finding myself trapped between his body and the door, his face inches from mine. "Thank you," he said quietly, his breath warm against my forehead. for giving my son something I couldn't. Hope. Then he stepped back, releasing me, and I fled into the hallway like a woman escaping temptation. The next weeks established a new dynamic between the three of us. Vincent was home more frequently than Mrs. Chen had implied was normal, his business trips shorter or postponed. He joined us for dinners, participated in Luca's bedtime routine, even sat in on some of our daytime activities. Watching him with Luca revealed layers I hadn't expected. He was patient, attentive, genuinely interested in his son's thoughts and feelings. He asked questions about Isabella now, encouraged Luca to share memories, even if his own voice grew tight with grief when her name was mentioned. But there were other moments that revealed the darkness Mrs. Chen had warned about. Phone calls he took in another room, his voice dropping to dangerous levels. Visitors who came late at night, men with hard eyes and expensive suits who looked at me with calculation until Vincent's cold stare warned them off. Mornings when he emerged from his home office with blood on his knuckles that he casually washed away while making coffee. I didn't ask questions. That was the unspoken agreement between us. I cared for Luca, created a bubble of normalcy and safety for him, and I deliberately remained ignorant of the details of Vincent's other life. But ignorance didn't mean blindness. One afternoon, about a month into my employment, Luca and I were in his room when raised voices filtered through from Vincent's office. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Argument, confrontation, the kind of tension that made the air feel electric with potential violence. Luca's small body tensed beside me, his eyes widening with fear. "Papa's angry," he whispered. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "It's okay." A crash sounded, something heavy hitting a wall. Luca flinched, and without thinking, I pulled him into my lap, wrapping my arms around him protectively. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe." The office door slammed open, and I heard footsteps heading toward the front door. Moments later, the apartment door closed with a sharp bang. Silence settled over the space, heavy and uncomfortable. I waited several minutes before carefully setting Luca down. "Stay here for just a moment, okay? I need to check on your papa." "Don't make him mad," Luca said, his voice small and frightened. "Please, Naomi." "I won't. I promise." I found Vincent in his office, standing with his back to the door, hands braced on his desk. His shoulders were tight with tension, and I could see a thin cut on his right hand, blood dripping slowly onto the polished wood surface. "Vincent?" I said softly. He didn't turn around. "You should be with Luca." "Luca is fine. You're bleeding." "It's nothing." I moved further into the room, despite the warning in his voice. "Let me see." "Naomi, let me see," I repeated firmly. Finally, he turned, and the raw fury in his eyes should have sent me running. But beneath the anger, I saw pain and frustration, the weight of whatever burden he carried crushing down on him. I took his injured hand gently, examining the cut. It wasn't deep, but it needed cleaning. "First aid kit?" "Bathroom cabinet." I retrieved the supplies and returned to find him leaning against his desk, some of the tension bleeding out of his posture. Carefully, I cleaned the wound, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped it with gauze. The entire time, I felt his eyes on me, that intense gaze that seemed to see through every layer I'd built to protect myself. "You should be afraid of me," he said quietly, as I finished securing the bandage. "Should I?" I looked up at him. "Are you a danger to me or Luca?" "Never to you, never to him." "Then, I'm not afraid." His uninjured hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone in a gesture so gentle it seemed at odds with the violence I knew he was capable of. "You should be," he repeated, his voice rough, "because I'm beginning to want things I have no right to want." My breath caught in my throat, and I knew I should step away, should maintain the professional boundary between us. But I couldn't seem to move, caught in the gravity of his presence. "Vincent, Papa?" Luca's small voice from the doorway broke the moment. We stepped apart quickly, but not before I saw the understanding in those dark eyes. Luca was young, but he wasn't oblivious. "I'm here, Bambino," Vincent said, his voice instantly gentler. He crouched down and opened his arms, and Luca ran to him, wrapping his small arms around his father's neck. "Are you okay?" Luca asked, his voice muffled against Vincent's shoulder. "I'm okay," Vincent assured him, holding his son tightly. "Just some business problems, nothing for you to worry about." But Luca was worrying. I could see it in the tension of his small body, in the way he clung to his father. This was the reality of their lives, I realized. Luca living with the constant awareness that his father's world was dangerous, that violence could erupt at any moment, that the people he loved might not always be safe. "How about we make cookies?" I suggested brightly, trying to restore some normalcy. "I bet your papa could use some chocolate chip cookies right about now." Luca lifted his head, looking between his father and me. "Can papa help?" Vincent's expression softened. "I would love to help. But first, I need to finish some work. Why don't you and Naomi get started and I'll join you in 20 minutes. After Luca and I left the office, I heard Vincent make a phone call, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that made my skin prickle with awareness. I didn't try to listen. Instead, I focused on measuring flour and sugar with Luca, on making him laugh by getting flour on my nose accidentally, on creating the kind of simple, joyful moment that every child deserved. True to his word, Vincent appeared 20 minutes later, his suit jacket removed, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms marked with scars I'd never noticed before. He washed his hands thoroughly, and I pretended not to notice the way he checked to make sure all the blood was gone before joining us. "Okay, boss," I said, addressing Luca with exaggerated seriousness. "Show your papa how we fold in the chocolate chips." For the next hour, we existed in a bubble where Vincent Moretti wasn't a crime boss, and I wasn't the nanny. We were just 3 people covered in flour, laughing at misshapen cookies, and stealing chocolate chips when we thought the others weren't looking. Luca's joy was infectious, and even Vincent's perpetually guarded expression cracked into genuine smiles. At one point, as we waited for a batch to bake, Luca climbed into his father's lap, content and secure. Vincent's arms wrapped around him automatically, and the expression on his face, pure love mixed with fierce protectiveness, made my chest ache with an emotion I wasn't ready to name. Our eyes met over Luca's head, and something passed between us. An understanding, a connection, a recognition that we were building something here that transcended professional boundaries and carefully maintained distance. That night, after Luca was asleep and I was preparing to leave, Vincent stopped me again at the door. It was becoming our routine, these late-night conversations in the dimly lit entryway. The situation I mentioned before, with the rival family. He began without preamble. "It's escalating. I need you to be more careful. No deviations from your route home, no stopping for errands, no talking to strangers." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. Should I be worried about Luca? The building security is the best money can buy, Vincent assured me. And there are always men watching, even when you can't see them. But yes, increased vigilance is necessary. I nodded, processing this information. "What happens if—" "Nothing will happen," he interrupted, his voice hard with certainty. "I will not allow anyone to hurt my son or—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "Or?" I prompted softly. His eyes met mine, and the intensity in them stole my breath. "Or you," he finished quietly. "I won't allow anyone to hurt you, Naomi." The possessive declaration should have frightened me. This man, this dangerous man, was claiming some kind of ownership over my safety, my well-being. But instead of fear, I felt something warm and treacherous bloom in my chest. "Vincent, I'm just the nanny. You stopped being just the nanny weeks ago," he said, moving closer. "You're important to my son, which makes you important to me. Is that all?" The question escaped before I could stop it, bold and dangerous. His hand came up to cup my face, and I found myself leaning into the touch despite every warning bell sounding in my mind. "No," he admitted, his voice rough. "That's not all. But it's all I can offer right now. My life, my world, it's no place for someone like you." "Someone like me," I repeated, stung by the implication. "Good," he clarified, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. Pure, untouched by the darkness I live in. You deserve better than what I can give you. I reached up and covered his hand with mine, holding his touch against my face. What if I want to decide that for myself? For a moment I thought he might kiss me. I could see the desire in his eyes, feel the tension thrumming between us. But then he stepped back, removing his hand from my face and leaving me feeling cold and bereft. Go home, Naomi, he said, his voice tight with restraint. Before I forget all the reasons why this is a terrible idea. I left, but his words echoed in my mind the entire subway ride home. The weeks that followed were a study in restraint and growing tension. Vincent was home more often than not, his presence a constant heat at the edges of my awareness. We maintained careful distance in front of Luca, but the looks we exchanged, the accidental touches that lingered too long, the conversations that stretched late into the night all spoke of a connection growing, despite our best efforts to contain it. Luca, for his part, blossomed under the attention of both his father and me. He talked freely about his mother now, sharing memories with a smile rather than tears. His nightmares, which had plagued him according to Mrs. Chen, became rare. He laughed easily, played with abandon, and showed affection openly. He's become a different child, Mrs. Chen remarked one afternoon when she stopped by to deliver groceries. She watched Luca and Vincent building an elaborate train track together in the living room. I haven't seen him this happy since before Mrs. Moretti passed. He just needed time and attention, I said, though my eyes were fixed on Vincent, on the way he listened seriously to Luca's instructions about where the bridge should go. Mrs. Chen's knowing gaze shifted to me. It's more than that. He needed a mother's love, and you've given him that. Her words unsettled me. I was the nanny, not Luca's mother. No matter how much I loved him, no matter how deeply he'd worked his way into my heart, I had no permanent claim on his life. That night, after Luca was in bed, I found myself lingering longer than usual. Vincent was in the kitchen pouring himself a glass of wine, and he offered me one without asking. You look troubled, he observed as I accepted the glass. Mrs. Chen said something today, I admitted, leaning against the counter. About Luca needing a mother's love. Vincent's expression grew guarded. And that bothers you? I'm not his mother, I said quietly. No matter how much I care about him, I'm still just an employee. Someday this job will end, and I'll have to walk away from him. I stopped myself before I could say, from both of you. From? Vincent prompted, moving closer. I shook my head, unable to voice the truth. That walking away from Luca would break my heart. That walking away from Vincent would destroy something in me I hadn't even known existed. He set his wine glass down and took mine from my hand, placing it beside his. Then he stepped into my space, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the subtle cologne that had become intimately familiar. Say it, he commanded softly. Tell me what you're afraid to walk away from. Vincent. Say it, Naomi. You, I whispered, the confession torn from somewhere deep inside me. I'm afraid to walk away from you. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then, with a muttered curse in Italian, he closed the distance between us, his mouth claiming mine in a kiss that erased every rational thought from my mind. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, consuming, weeks of restraint and denied desire pouring into the connection between us. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I responded with equal hunger, my fingers clutching his shirt, as if he might disappear if I let go. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against mine. This is a mistake, he said, though his arms remained tight around me. Probably, I agreed, my voice shaky. I'm dangerous. My world is dangerous. Being with me puts you at risk. I know. You deserve better than a man like me. I pulled back enough to look into his eyes. Don't I get a say in what I deserve? His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my lower lip. If I do this, if I claim you as mine, there's no going back, Naomi. I don't share. I don't do casual. You would be mine completely. The possessive declaration should have sent me running, Instead, it made heat pool low in my stomach. And would I get the same claim on you? A slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. I've been yours since the moment I walked through that door and saw you with my son. I just didn't want to admit it. This time, when he kissed me, it was slower, deeper, a promise and a claim all at once. I melted into him, giving myself over to the moment, to the connection that had been building between us despite every obstacle. We broke apart at the sound of small footsteps padding down the hallway. Vincent and I stepped away from each other just as Luca appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. I had a bad dream, he said, his voice small and frightened. I was moving before Vincent could, crouching down to gather Luca into my arms. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe. Can you sing to me? He asked, his face pressed against my shoulder. Of course. Vincent watched as I carried his son back to bed, his expression unreadable. I settled Luca under his covers and began singing softly, the lullaby that had become our bedtime ritual. Vincent appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, his eyes fixed on us with an intensity that made my skin tingle. By the time the song ended, Luca was already drifting back to sleep. I pressed a kiss to his forehead and stood carefully, not wanting to wake him. Vincent stepped aside as I passed through the doorway, then followed me into the hallway. He loves you, Vincent said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. I love him too. Naomi. He caught my hand, pulling me to face him. I need you to understand what you're getting into. My enemies, if they knew how much you mean to us, would use you without hesitation. The life I can offer you, it comes with guards and restrictions and constant awareness of danger. I know, I said, squeezing his hand. And I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing both of you. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. He pulled me against him, his mouth finding mine in a kiss that was both tender and claiming. When he pulled back, his expression was serious. There are things you need to know, he said. About my family, about the business. I won't lie to you or keep you ignorant anymore. If we're doing this, you deserve the truth. We returned to the living room, and over the next hour, Vincent told me things I suspected he'd never shared with anyone outside his inner circle. About the Moretti family's history in organized crime, about the territories they controlled, the businesses they ran both legitimate and otherwise, about the enemies who would never stop trying to take what was his, about the constant threat of violence that shadowed his every move. He told me about Isabella, about their marriage arranged by their families when they were both barely adults, about how they'd grown to love each other despite the circumstances, about her kindness and strength, about the way she'd died suddenly from an aneurysm, leaving him and Luca shattered. I swore after she died that I would never put another woman in this position, Vincent said, his voice heavy with old pain, that I would never ask someone I cared about to live with this constant danger. But then you walked into our lives, and everything I'd promised myself became impossible to maintain. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. I'm not Isabella, and I'm not walking into this blind. I know what you are, Vincent. I know the world you live in, and I'm still choosing to stay. Why? The question was almost desperate. Why would you choose this? Because I love your son, I said simply, and because I'm falling in love with you. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and honest. Vincent's hand tightened on mine, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve either of you, the way you've brought light back into our lives. Maybe not, I agreed with a small smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly, as if I might disappear if he let go. We stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, acknowledging the line we'd just crossed and the impossibility of going back. The next morning brought an abrupt return to reality. I arrived at the apartment to find Vincent on the phone, his voice cold and hard in a way I'd never heard before. Luca was still asleep, and Vincent gestured for me to wait in the kitchen. When he finally ended the call, his expression was grim. There's been an incident, he said without preamble. One of my warehouses was hit last night. 2 men dead, significant product loss. Fear, sharp and immediate, shot through me. Are you in danger, is Luca? Not immediately. But this is an escalation. A declaration of war. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. I have to leave town for a few days. Handle this situation before it gets worse. What do you need me to do? His eyes met mine and I saw gratitude mixed with concern. Stay with Luca. Don't let him out of your sight. There will be additional security posted at the building, and I'm leaving Marco, my best man, to oversee your protection. Vincent. He crossed to me in 2 strides, pulling me into a fierce kiss. I need you to promise me you'll be careful. Follow every protocol. Trust no one outside my inner circle. Keep Luca safe. I promise. And Naomi? His hand cupped my face. When I get back, we're going to have a serious conversation about the future, about what this means for all of us. The promise in his words made my heart race. I'll be here. After Vincent left, the apartment felt colder, emptier. Luca woke an hour later and immediately asked where his father was. I kept my explanation simple but honest. He had to go away for work, but he'll be back in a few days. In the meantime, it's just you and me. Luca's face fell slightly, but he nodded with the resigned acceptance of a child too familiar with his father's absences. Will you stay with me the whole time? Every minute, I promised. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. I stayed at the apartment rather than leaving each evening, sleeping in the guest room so I could be close if Luca needed me. Marco, a broad-shouldered man with knowing eyes and an ever-present earpiece, was a constant presence, along with at least 3 other security personnel I glimpsed, but never directly interacted with. Vincent called twice a day, once in the morning and once before Luca's bedtime. The conversations were carefully neutral in front of Luca, but afterward, when I took the phone to another room, Vincent's voice would drop lower, more intimate. Are you okay? He would ask, the question weighted with all the things we couldn't say. We're fine. Luca misses you, but he's doing well. And you? Do you miss me? The vulnerability in the question always surprised me. This powerful, dangerous man worried about whether I missed him. Yes, I would admit. The apartment feels empty without you. Soon, he would promise. I'll be home soon. On the 3rd night, I woke to the sound of voices in the hallway. Disoriented, I checked the clock 3:17 in the morning. Heart pounding, I slipped out of bed and cracked open the door. Marco was speaking urgently into his phone. I don't care what time it is. Wake him up. Tell Mr. Moretti we have a situation. Ice flooded my veins. I opened the door wider. What's happening? Marco's expression was grim. Miss Brooks, please return to your room. Not until you tell me what's going on. Is Luca in danger? He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. There's been chatter. Intelligence suggesting a possible move against the family. We're increasing security protocols. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Vincent's name flashed on the screen, and I answered immediately. Vincent? Naomi listened to me carefully. His voice was tight with controlled urgency. I need you to wake Luca and pack bags for both of you. Essential items only. Marco is going to take you to a safe house until this situation is resolved. How bad is it? Bad enough that I'm not taking any chances with you and my son. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. I need you both safe, Naomi. I can't focus on handling this if I'm worried about you. We'll be ready in 10 minutes. I'm coming back tonight. I'll meet you at the safe house. And Naomi, his voice dropped lower. I love you. I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you, and I will do whatever it takes to keep you and Luca safe. The words, so unexpected and so perfect, made tears spring to my eyes. I love you too. Come back to us safe. Always. I woke Luca gently, keeping my voice calm despite the fear racing through me. Hey, sweetheart. We're going on a little adventure. I need you to help me pack some of your favorite things, okay? Luca, still fuzzy with sleep, nodded and climbed out of bed. Where's Papa? He's coming to meet us, but we need to go to a special place first. 20 minutes later, we were in an armored SUV with tinted windows, Marco driving and 2 other security personnel in a second vehicle behind us. Luca had fallen back asleep against my side, and I held him tightly, watching the city lights blur past. The safe house turned out to be a sprawling estate an hour outside the city, surrounded by high walls and monitored by enough security cameras to rival a military installation. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable a home, rather than a bunker, with soft furniture and warm lighting that eased some of my tension. A middle-aged woman named Rosa greeted us, her smile kind as she showed us to our rooms. Mr. Moretti called ahead. "Your room is next to the young master's. Please, make yourselves comfortable. If you need anything, just ask." I settled Luca in his temporary room, staying with him until he fell back asleep. Then I returned to my own room and collapsed onto the bed, adrenaline finally fading and leaving exhaustion in its wake. A soft knock woke me. I jerked upright, disoriented, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. The knock came again, and I stumbled to the door. Vincent stood on the other side, and the relief that flooded through me at the sight of him was overwhelming. He looked exhausted, his suit rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. But he was whole, unhurt, and here. "Vincent," I breathed. And then I was in his arms, holding him tightly, feeling his heartbeat against my cheek. "You're safe," he murmured into my hair, his arms almost crushing in their intensity. "Thank God you're safe." I pulled back just enough to look up at him. "What happened? Is it over?" "It's handled," he said, his expression hard. "The family that moved against us has been dealt with. There won't be any more threats from that quarter." I didn't ask what "dealt with" meant. I didn't want to know the details. Instead, I pulled him into the room and closed the door, suddenly needing to feel his lips on mine, to confirm that he was really here, really safe. He met me halfway, his mouth claiming mine in a kiss that was desperate and relieved and full of all the fear we'd both been carrying. We broke apart only when we heard small footsteps in the hallway. "Papa!" Luca's delighted cry came a moment before he burst through the door I'd left unlocked. He launched himself at Vincent, who caught him easily, lifting him up and holding him tightly. "I'm here, Bambino," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here, and everything's okay now." Luca pulled back to look at his father's face. "Promise? Promise you're staying?" "I promise. No more trips for a while." The 3 of us stayed at the safe house for 2 more days while Vincent's people ensured the threat was truly neutralized. It was strange, existing in this bubble outside of reality, but it also felt like the first time we'd been able to just be together without schedules or responsibilities, or the outside world intruding. We played games with Luca, cooked meals together in the large kitchen, and in the evenings after Luca was asleep, Vincent and I would sit on the terrace overlooking the grounds and talk about everything and nothing. "I want this to be permanent," Vincent said on our last night there, his arm around my shoulders as we watched the stars. "You, me, Luca, a family." My heart stuttered in my chest. "Vincent, I know it's fast," he interrupted. "I know we've only known each other for 2 months, but when you've lived the life I have, when you've faced death as many times as I have, you learn not to waste time on uncertainty. I love you, Naomi, and Luca loves you, and I want to build a life with you." I turned to face him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that I might say no. "I want that too," I said softly, "but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll do everything you can to stay safe, to come home to us, because I can't do this, can't build a life with you and love your son, if I have to live in constant fear of losing you." Vincent's hand came up to cup my face. "I can't promise there won't be danger. That's the reality of my world. But I can promise that you and Luca are my priority, that I will do everything in my power to stay alive and safe for both of you." "Then yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, I want to build a life with you." He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of promise. When we finally pulled apart, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my grandmother's," he said, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring surrounded by sapphires. She gave it to me before she died and made me promise I would only give it to a woman I truly loved, a woman worthy of carrying the Moretti name. He slipped from the chair and knelt before me, his ice blue eyes holding mine. Naomi Brooks, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Luca's mother? Will you build this life with us, knowing all the complications and dangers it will bring? Yes, I said through my tears. Yes, to all of it. He slipped the ring onto my finger, then stood and pulled me into his arms, kissing me with a passion and tenderness that made me dizzy. We told Luca the next morning. His reaction was pure joy, launching himself at both of us and chattering excitedly about how he'd always wanted Naomi to be his real mom. Does this mean Naomi will live with us forever? He asked, his dark eyes wide with hope. Forever, Vincent confirmed, pulling us both close. We're a family now. 3 months later, we were married in a small ceremony at the estate. Sophia Moretti, Vincent's mother, cried through the entire thing and welcomed me into the family with warmth that surprised me. Luca served as ring-bearer, his face glowing with happiness. My grandmother, despite her illness, made the trip to watch me marry the man I loved. Afterward, she pulled me aside, her weathered hand clasping mine. "You're sure about this life?" she asked, her eyes knowing. "About this man and his world? I'm sure, Grandma. I love him, and I love Luca. This is where I belong." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you have my blessing. Just promise me you'll hold on to that goodness inside you. Don't let his world change who you are. I promise." The first year of our marriage was an adjustment, learning to be a wife and a mother simultaneously, navigating the complex politics of Vincent's family business, accepting the reality of guards and security protocols as part of our daily life. But through it all, the love between the three of us only deepened. Vincent kept his promise. While he couldn't eliminate all danger from our lives, he did everything possible to shield Luca and me from it. He was home more, delegated more responsibility to trusted lieutenants, and created space for us to just be a family. Luca thrived under our combined care. The lonely, grieving boy I'd first met was gone, replaced by a happy, confident child who knew he was loved fiercely by both his parents. He started calling me Mama Naomi, and each time I heard it, my heart swelled with love and gratitude. On our first anniversary, Vincent had the penthouse renovated to include a proper art studio for me. I'd returned to painting, finding inspiration in the life we'd built, in Luca's laughter, in Vincent's rare smiles. "You've given me back something I'd lost," Vincent said one evening as he watched me work on a canvas, Luca asleep in the next room. "Not just happiness, but hope. The belief that life could be more than just survival and obligation." I set down my brush and went to him, settling onto his lap and wrapping my arms around his neck. "You've given me just as much. A family, a purpose, a love I never thought I'd find." His arms tightened around me. "I love you, Naomi Moretti, more than I have words to express." "I love you too." 2 years after I'd first walked into that quiet apartment to care for a lonely little boy, I stood in the nursery we'd created, my hand resting on my swollen belly, watching Vincent read Luca a bedtime story. The room was filled with warmth and love, so different from that first day. Luca, now 8 and proud to be a big brother soon, caught my eye and grinned. "Mama, after Papa finishes, will you sing to the baby?" "Of course, sweetheart." Vincent looked up at me, his ice blue eyes soft with love. This dangerous man, this crime boss who commanded fear and respect throughout the city, looked at me as if I held his entire world in my hands. And perhaps I did. Just as he held mine. We'd built something impossible together. A family forged from grief and danger, from an attraction that shouldn't have existed, from a love that defied every logical reason why it should fail, but it hadn't failed. It had flourished, growing stronger with each challenge we faced together. That night, after Luca was asleep and Vincent and I lay tangled together in our bed, his hand resting protectively on my stomach where our daughter grew, I thought about that first day. About the quiet apartment and the lonely boy. About the moment Vincent had walked through that door and everything had changed. "No regrets?" Vincent murmured against my hair, as if reading my thoughts. I turned to face him, placing my hand over his on my belly. "Not a single one. This life, this family, you and Luca, and soon our daughter, this is everything I never knew I needed." His lips found mine in a kiss that was tender and possessive all at once. "You're everything I never knew I deserved." Outside, the city sprawled below us, full of danger and complications, and the darkness that would always be part of Vincent's world. But in here, in this room, in this bed, in the family we'd created together, there was only light, only love, only the certainty that we'd found something rare and precious worth protecting at any cost. I'd walked into that apartment to babysit a lonely boy. I'd stayed because I fell in love with a powerful man who'd never trusted anyone until me. And in doing so, I'd found my home, my family, my forever. And I would choose them, choose this life, every single day for the rest of my life.